So thank you for coming out right before the holidays. We appreciate it. So first up tonight is Ron Pascho, and he's doing a show on Ethiopia. He's a Seattle native who worked almost 3 decades as a research microbiologist. In 2005, he retired from a career in fish health research and completed a rewarding term as president of the Seattle Metals Guild, then considered the largest art jewelry guild in the United States. Having more time to spend in his studio energized his interest in metal smithing that began over 15 years prior. In 2007, Ron was juried into Northwest Designer Craftsman. There are few people in the audience tonight in that group. I'm in it myself. It's a 5-state nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote the understanding and appreciation of fine craft. This began a series of significant accomplishments by Ron, including chair of the NWDC Exhibitions Committee, where he managed to work with about 100 artists trying to get a job done.
No small feat.
Yeah. If you've ever worked with artists, you know what this means. Where he successfully organized the organization's 50th anniversary show at the Whatcom Museum in Bellingham, complete with a professionally designed catalog commemorating that anniversary and the artwork of each of its members. He was also co-chair of NWDC's Living Treasures Project, whose goal is to support the educational mission of NWDC by creating an ongoing series of video profiles documenting the Northwest's most important and influential elder craft professionals and advocates. So he did 3 of those, one on Ron Ho, one on Tip Toland, and the most recent one on Lloyd Herman, curator. Today, Ron remains on the board of directors for NWDC, this time wearing his treasurer's hat, and tries to get into his studio to make art. Ron?
Well, thank you, Lynn, and thank you for inviting me, and thanks everybody for coming out. I'm going to give you probably what might be considered a real quick snapshot of Ethiopia, because it has so much history. You could talk for days on it. Ethiopia is in the northeast corner of the African continent, and it's completely landlocked. And it has the distinction of being the only country in the African continent that wasn't colonized. In the 1930s, before World War II, the Italians tried to move in, and it didn't work out real well for them. And the Ethiopians are very, very proud of this point, and it pops up all the time. Addis Ababa is the capital. It's about 5 million people, and it is the largest city in the world that's located in a landlocked country. So it's not built by Western standards, certainly. It doesn't operates more by the rules of Africa. You don't get your Roma tomatoes in a giant semi-truck. They come in something like this. And the people are very, very colorful. I just really, really loved it. And here's probably the happiest woman on earth. And I really, really tried to have a conversation with her, but that didn't work out. But because I wanted to know what she was doing with all those plastic bottles. But I'm certain it was a recycling situation where she was handing out cooking oil, or they even used them for gasoline. And some of the people, they range from what I consider, kind of the mischievous to the kind of ethereal, just beautiful people. And it was just a joy to be around them. One thing Ethiopians love is injera, which is that bag, bread in that flat pan. And this really poses a problem for Westerners because that injera is in fact your silverware and your plate. So you need to be able to eat with your fingers. And the woman arriving with that vessel is going to pour all that in the middle, and there's your dinner. And a lot of us came to love this stuff. A few people on the trip didn't, and were always ordering pasta, which I guess brings back the Italian influence, certainly. The other thing that Ethiopians claim to be have the origin of coffee, and they're very, very good at it. This is their version of an espresso stand at an airport. So, no safety features whatsoever, no regulations. But the coffee's very, very good and very inexpensive. The other thing that they love is chat. That is these green leaves that are mildly narcotic and kind of an amphetamine-like thing. And I guess it's okay just to sit in the middle of the street with your goat and chew chat. And I got to tell you that some of us tried this, and my experience was that I got numb lips, and I gave up on the whole thing, So, I don't know. It's got to be an acquired habit, I guess. The other thing they loved at that time was Obama. And so we have the Obama gift shop traditional. God knows what was in there, but, So everybody loved Obama. And the other thing that was so ubiquitous was these doggone yellow plastic jugs. And they were originally used as cooking oil. Then they filter out and they're used for water or gasoline or almost anything. And one of their emperors, Haile Selassie, is very, very revered by the Rastafarians, which is a movement that began in Jamaica in the 1930s. And they saw him as a Masonic figure who was going to lead a future golden age of eternal peace, righteousness, and prosperity. And he's actually buried in Ethiopia at this, I got a heavy thumb there, I guess, at this Holy Trinity Chapel, and they have a prayer wall where people can go and offer prayers. Also around Addis is here's a few looks at the views of the church. It's a very beautiful, it's got a very nice patina on it, which I just fell in love with. Outside of Addis is Mount Entoto, which is in the Entoto Range, which is, they're about 3,900 meters up, so we're talking Mount Rainier height. And this particular day was St. Mary Day, and it was being celebrated on the mountain at the church, which included, of course, everyone gathering for a wedding. And this is a pretty typical Ethiopian wedding involving drums. They always have drums at any event that is a celebration. And you can see the bride and groom, and so we were able to kind of enjoy this too, so that was very nice. The shawls, for special days like this, they wear them upside down. And for the life of me, can't tell if they're upside down or not, So. So this is the trailhead for a hike to the Blue Nile Falls. And the Blue Nile River flows out of Ethiopia into Sudan. It's a very large river. You can see what we're up against immediately. It's not a very well-maintained trailhead. Along the way, you might see these barrel-like things up in the trees, and they're actually beehives. Yeah, very, very sophisticated, almost look like jet engines, actually. So, and I don't know how they harvested this stuff. Somebody went up there and did it. Ethiopia is also the home of 21 species of birds that are found nowhere else in the world. This particular one is not one of those. This is a common weaver bird, but they make these nests that hang and they come up through the bottom to lay their eggs. Oops. And this is approaching Blue Nile Falls, and I just want you to kind of keep in mind that there's cows there, and we're walking in this place in the mud, and certainly the cows had been out there, here's the falls, and they're 45 meters high and about 400 meters wide. So that's 1,200 feet wide. It's pretty big, and the water was really flowing. And so think back about the cows. Here's our feet, what we've walked through. We also actually walked through an ex-slaughter yard, I guess. That's what they said. So, and there were kids at the end of the hike who would wash your feet off for like a quarter. You know, they didn't do a very good job, but yeah. And this is Zumra Nura, who is the founder of the Aura Amba commune. And I want to be sure and get him right. He founded this commune in 1980 because he didn't like the injustices he saw in society. So they worked by 4 rules. One is gender equality. Number 2 is the rights of children. And 3 is the principle of helping the less fortunate, ill, and old. And finally, the principle of discouraging dishonesty, lying, murder, and stealing. So those are things to live by, I guess, today, and maybe we could use a little more of this in Western society. And Commune offers kind of vocational training and weaving, so they start from the very start of pulling the wool, and then winding it, and finally turning it on the wheel. And it was pretty incredible. And like I say, they also offer a school for children. This is the kindergarten, and kids all seem very happy. I love those tables they have, which are just mud slabs, I guess. And note that the teacher has a little one on her back, you know, who's peeking out. And they have a library and a librarian, and I don't know, I just love that bookcases, and never to be duplicated. And this is near the city of Gondor, and this is Fasciolatus bath. He was an emperor, and so that was in the 1600s, and they still use it for what's called an Epiphany celebration. And they fill it full of water, and the first person in gets blessed by the priests. So, who was the first person? I have no idea. We didn't have an opportunity to see it, but I was able to get this picture. This was something kind of interesting that we found out, is that this is a ceiling of a church, and all these heads up here are of Ethiopians, and the reason is they have the perspective is so that both eyes show. if you look at a manuscript such as this, and this is probably St. George, one of their heroes, you can see that he's on his horse and he's got his two eyes, but down below, and undoubtedly in Italian, is the one he's after, and he's only got one eye. They never let the enemy have two eyes in a drawing. So if you ever see that, you can tell your friends what's going on. Elsewhere in the country are these stellae. A stela is actually a carved monument that depicts or tells about some special occurrence, special people or something. And of course, those Italians, they came and stole one and took it back to Italy. And it took an act of, several governments and the United Nations to get the thing back. And this particular one was the largest carved stone stelae in the world. And I could make an erection joke here, but I'm not going to do it. And interestingly enough, and total surprise to everyone there, down the road was the Seattle Cinema. Go figure. And what I want to point out is there's a stela there juxtaposed to our Space Needle, which I assume they thought of as a stela. And there's a little teeny Smith Tower there too, which I guess would be another stela. So we have some relationship to Ethiopia. And it might have been fun to go to that place and see if they have really bad popcorn like most of our theaters. Ethiopia is also the reputed home of the Ark of the Covenant, which was repeatedly brought down from Jerusalem. We don't know because you can't see it, you can't go in there, and you can't talk to the priest who guards it. So it's up to you. And I kind of got a laugh out of this because I was looking at this image, and this is a very sacred place, and what do they got on the roof but tarps? And so I don't know, there's some structural problem going on or what there. So this is a flight to the holy city of Lalibela, and this is where the rock-hewn churches are, and these are probably the most famous highlight of Ethiopia. And the king Lalibela commissioned them as kind of a holy place, and there are about a dozen of them at 3 locations. And rather than building a church above ground, such as these apartments or whatever they are down there, they chose to carve them out of the lava. And this is our hotel with probably what has to be one of the most spectacular views in the world for drinking your coffee and birds. And so here's the top of the church, and so it goes down. And it's been estimated it would take about 40,000 workers to carve these things. But the local legend is that there was a celestial workforce that did most of the work. And if you ask them what they look like or something, they said they didn't know because they only worked at night. So that's the legend. I pass it on to you. Help. Thank you. So this is a church going down in the earth, and it's carved out of red lava. And not only did they carve the outside, but they carved the inside also. And these are massive structures. You can imagine what amount of work it must have taken. The drums, always have drums, and a ghostly priest in the background. And then if we leave there and we get on the light rail to the Omo River Valley, there's Mars. You leave this historical north and you go into more of what would be old Ethiopia, the tribal lands. And they rely on the Omo River to survive. So there are about 8 different tribes, and they're agricultural people, and they rely on the river, and they rely on the flooding of the river to add nutrients to the soil. It's called flood retreat cultivation, and not my words. And so the big issue, of course, is that the Omo River is a big river, and they're building a dam on it, which is, of course, going to affect the flooding and the livelihood of these tribes in the south. And again, ironically, the dam is being built by an Italian company. So, they just can't get rid of them. And, so this is the Hammer tribe, and he's actually sitting on a headrest. I was going to bring a couple along. I actually have some that they sleep on behind their head. I don't know how it would be sitting on it. So he's obviously a mature guy, and he's been through this rite of passage, which involves running naked, because you're supposed to be losing your childhood, across a big line of cows, and you got to go back and forth 4 times before you've entered adulthood. And of course, the young ladies are spooking the cows, trying to get them to fall off. And this is the Mersai. And this practice of putting clay discs in their lips was started back in the slave trading days to discourage the slave traders from taking the women away from the tribes. And finally, I'm just going to end with this Dorsey 100-year hut. And it's a 100-year hut because they have a termite problem. So as the termites eat the bottom of the hut up, they have the ability just to carve the door a little taller, and everything's copacetic until it gets done. And after 100 years, it's too short. I guess that's the point. So that's a little just snippet of Ethiopia, and I don't know if there's any questions. (2011).
Ron, will you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody asked me when I was there. It was in 2011, and that was before the last war started. And a lot of the area in the north where we were was in the war zone. And I don't know what happened. I hope they respected those churches and stuff.
Ron, what is the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, you could tell them that.
Well, I believe it's the box the 10 Commandments came in.
Right.
And I was on that trip, and so was Mars, who's sitting in the audience, and maybe somebody else. Every church we went to, they would tell us that we have a copy of the Ark of the Covenant. but nobody can see it.
Yeah.
So we wondered, how the heck do they make a copy if nobody's ever seen it?
Yeah, that was a question that was raised several times, and, you know.
He just meant you couldn't see it.
True.
Well, they wouldn't let you in that building, that's for sure, and they wouldn't even let you near it. So,
How many people went on that trip? How many people went on that trip?
8 or 10?
8 or 10, something like that, yeah.
You planned it yourself, or did you go?
No, a friend of ours planned it, and it was mostly artists going to, because we were interested in the art and the history. So, you know, and I could stand up here, I got enough images to go for a long time.
Ethiopia is an amazing place. It's called the birthplace, thank you, I couldn't think of that first word. Yes, the birthplace of
Yeah, Lucy,
civilization.
I think, came out of there.
And there's just so much to see and learn. It's an amazing trip. 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
I was there a few days short because I got pneumonia, but that, don't let that discourage you.
How did you get around? I thought canoe maybe, but.
We had a van, and we did a lot of walking. It seemed like.
It was interesting for me to see these pictures because, of course, some of the pictures reminded me of some of the hardships. And I'll just tell you about one of them. We were taken on an elephant walk. And in the first place, elephants are considered really dangerous, so you probably shouldn't be out in the middle of a big field with elephants maybe. But we walked for 4 hours and we never saw one elephant. And a guide would show up at some point and say, listen, we've spotted some, they're just right around the corner. And then, you know, we'd walk another 40 minutes. And on that trip, there were 4 people over 80. And sometimes we would start straggling because we were tired. They didn't have a lunch for us or anything else. And we would look back and we could see some of our people laying on the ground. And for some reason, they didn't tell us ahead of time how you need to dress for this particular walk. We didn't know what we were going to be doing. And one of our people had on sequined flip-flops. And we approached a pretty big river that was about crotch deep. And
Flowing.
the guides started taking their shoes off. And we're like, we're not crossing that river, are we? And it was a rushing river, too. And we started to try to go in, and we were all scared to death. It's Africa. Maybe there are leeches in there. And we finally figured out that if we all held hands all the way across the river, nobody would get washed away. And we had to do that a couple of times.
I have a video of that. I should have put it in. But.
Well, I think you handed your camera to a guy that held the camera upside down or
Right,
something.
yeah.
If I remember right. Well, we probably better move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
I'm not the next speaker. My name is Ann Darling, and I am here to introduce the doyenne of Tripod Night. And I'm going to read part of what she wrote and add some. Tacoma came alive 22 years ago when Lynn moved from Seattle to Tacoma. She did not write that. She's been a professional artist for over 40 years, making her living by doing commission work and selling mostly sculpture in galleries in various cities across the United States. She has welded skeletons of stylized animals, covering the armature in fabric, found objects, and sometimes concrete, like the chicken in my kitchen. Social commentary has been her focus. Lynn's a Capricorn who loves to play corkle, whatever that is. She'll take questions about that. Dominoes and cribbage, loves dinner parties, subscribes to the Tacoma News Tribune, and generally enjoys reading. She spends a couple of days a week in Seattle with her wonderful partner, Dick. Because Lynn can't help creating events for a building community, she lines up speakers for Tripod every month. Her artist friend, Lars Hughesby, organizes trips to exotic and out-of-the-way places for low-budget travelers like Lynn and her friends. She went with him to Iceland, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Morocco, Sri Lanka, and more. Because he organized the trip to Madagascar, because the trip he organized to Madagascar was postponed 3 years in a row due to COVID, Lynn decided to find a roommate and go anyway. The 2-week trip was not very expensive, but it does take 40 hours to get there. Tonight she's here to give you her view of Madagascar. Welcome.
So I think I've been back in town about 5 weeks now, so this trip is pretty fresh. Oops, I didn't even see that. Most people ask me, where the heck is Madagascar? And you can see that it's right off the coast of Africa. And then this is a painting that was on a restaurant wall, and I was motivated to go to see all the lemurs. And that's the only place in the world lemurs live, many varieties.
Lights, please, Eric.
Like Ann just said, these trips usually have 8 or 10 people. The trips Lars organizes, and since Lars wasn't there, and Jennifer and I got a prize for a tour for just 2 people, we were in a car all the time with a driver and the guide sitting in the front seat. And this is mostly what the roads look like. And we did quite a lot of driving. And there's myself and my roommate on a hike. By the way, looking at the Ethiopia show reminded me so much of the show I put together for you, because we've taken pictures of similar things that you'll see in all these poor countries. So this is just something we saw on the road. I'm showing you this picture because those bags have charcoal in them. So this is where they cut down the trees, they burn the trees, and put the fire out, so what's left is charcoal. And that's how they do their cooking. And you've probably heard that in Madagascar, all the trees are disappearing, and the red clay earth is just washing into the ocean, so they're pretty worried about what will happen to the crops there. So much of the country is parched looking like this. And here's a city or a town view. These women make a paste out of the baobab fruit, and that is to keep the sun off their faces. So it's sort of like sunblock.
And how did you get this picture?
You can't, if you've done any traveling, you know you can't just walk up and take pictures of people. Often they'd like to be tipped. And we asked our guide if he could arrange for us to get a picture. We saw a lot of women wearing this, and we wanted to get a picture. So he just slipped them some money. And we went to many markets. These are hot peppers, although we never ate anything there that was spicy at all, so I don't know who eats these. This is a meat market just on the street, and we worry so much about one fly landing on our meat. And, you know, the traffic is going by, and people are touching the meat and everything else, and everybody does just fine. This table was in a market, and these are herbs, and they grow so many different kinds of medicines. So we stood at this table, and they said, this is for a headache, and that's for sore feet, and so forth. And many of those things were really beautiful. We thought, we should bring some of those home. These kids were always very enthusiastic to have visitors and so sweet. This is what a typical meal looks like. We didn't really have a typical meal except for this one that our guide said he cooked himself. We know he smuggled it in from a hotel somewhere. So it's rice. They eat rice 3 times a day. Every person there eats rice. Almost every family owns their own plot for growing rice, and we saw that the mountains all the way to the top were terraced for growing rice. And they showed us how far they had to hand carry the water to keep their rice field growing. So to the left is a goat stew with mashed cassava leaves, making kind of a gravy. And to the right are white beans with probably tomatoes in them because they were tinted red. And we asked our guide, because at first we believed he really did make this for us, how did you get those white beans red? And he said, well, when you just cook them, they just turn red. Okay. So you can see that the crops are kind of rotated. Some are fallow. I showed you this picture because it appeared to us every building in Madagascar is made out of brick with a veneer over it, kind of a stucco veneer. And the earth is bright red everywhere. So they dig up the earth, they mix it with water, they shape it, and they leave it to dry, and then they put it in a kiln. That's it. And every building after building, even the 2- and 3-story buildings, are made out of brick. So there are some mountains in Madagascar. We stayed at an inn quite close to this. This picture is taken in a village. Erik, is this a place where there's a short video?
Later, when they make it like this, first they just curve it.
That beam was about 12 inches square, and we were told every board in Madagascar is cut, hand cut like that. And this next image is a picture of a fence that was made that way, hand cut, if you can believe it. Hand cut. They could have used a straight edge on this. So here's one of the guides. We were in the 2 weeks and a day trip we were on. We had about 7 guides and went to various research centers, national parks, reserves. And he's getting ready to put us in a canoe, and Jennifer and I were like, ooh, I hope we don't fall in the river. And so we made accidentally a big deal about getting into this canoe, and we didn't know we were going to an island that was about 2 minutes away. So then we had to get out of the canoe. And that is a reserve where, actually, I'm not sure these lemurs were on that island. So, Erik, is this another place for a video? Oh my goodness. I believe this is a bamboo lemur. Joe, is that right?
Yes.
black and white.
Tu comprends ça? Acrobatique?
Acrobacy. Again,
Acrobatique.
acrobat.
Oh my God. Oh my God, look at this.
You couldn't touch them. Of course, you wanted to reach out and hug them. Leaves, and it depends, I think, on what kind of lemurs they are. No, you're not allowed to touch them or feed them. They don't want these guys getting any diseases humans have. Erik, is there another video here?
Really short.
It's really short, so pay attention.
It's already gone.
That was it.
Talking about that.
Oh. So this lemur has a baby hanging onto its waist. You can barely see it. And you can see that baby straddling the mom's back. So Erik, I think there's a video here. So they're grooming that baby in this picture. More ringtail lemurs. I don't remember which type of lemur this is. It's a really broad range of the way they look. Erik? For this one, the guide, this is at night, and we've got a flashlight on it, and he rubbed a banana along that limb so the lemur would be attracted and then come out. Oh boy, this is my favorite one. So they had all kinds of chameleons, and this one, you approached the tree and you thought that was a piece of bark. It looks exactly like the bark. And then the guide touched it with a leaf, and it comes up off its legs and walks away. You don't expect it. And by the way, he's about 14 inches long, pretty big. Let's see. I'm trying to remember I think it's a Parsons chameleon. Is that right? We've got two people in the audience that have a lot of experience with Madagascar. Okay, there's a video coming after this one, so there's another Parsons chameleon. Watch carefully, watch. This is a leaf bug.
God, if he gets that shot, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Everybody knows what that is.
Beauty.
This is just a picture of a plant. I know you're trying to see the lemur in it. We were taken to a special park that features baobab trees, and the whole park had a lot of foliage in it, all gray. So everything looks completely dead. And when you look up close, you see it's covered in beautiful, lively flowers. Aren't those just the most amazing looking things? And to give you an idea of scale, there's one of our guides climbing it. That's it.
Oh, yay! Everybody,
So it's a lot of you in the audience have done one of these shows, and it is really challenging to do it in 15 minutes with 50 images, because you're looking through your slides and you go, oh my God, I can't even talk about the food, I can't even talk about the churches, I can't even talk about all the nice people we met, I can't even show you a picture of the guide. So, yes, Ann? I did. I brought back about 15 vanilla beans, and I also brought back a bottle of Madagascar rum, and I put the vanilla bean I saved for myself in the rum. Boy, is that delicious. You can try this at home, but you'll have to buy a vanilla bean, and here I think they cost about $20 a piece. So I bought a few packages and handed them out to friends. I only brought home 20, and I got about 100 friends. Just kidding.
Was it hard to buy the vanilla beans?
It kind of was, because our guide told us that you had to be really careful. Some of them were all dried out and, not really very good. So you were looking for the really plump ones that didn't cost a fortune. And by the way, when I was in Mexico a couple of months before that, I knew they grew vanilla in Mexico too, and weren't they $10 a piece? So I finally found some vanilla beans, and I went, great, I'll take them all. And he said, well, that'll be $40. I was like, never mind. I'm going to Madagascar, I'll get some there. And in Madagascar, I think I paid $2 a piece for them. So, there are people all over the street trying to sell you things, and sometimes they would be trying to sell vanilla, and I would look at them. I don't know how to tell a good one from a bad one, but if they look kind of stringy, I'd go, no thanks. I'll offer you a dime. More questions? Yes? Yell your question.
To what extent were the animals nocturnal or diurnal? And how did you see things at night?
Good question. At night, the guides know where to look, and they would have a cell phone and they would use the light on their camera to see it. And they would know that if you greased the branch up with a banana, one was likely to show up, which just happened exactly like that. Some of the lemurs are nocturnal. They're all primates, by the way. Some are nocturnal and some are daytime. Yes?
So the lemurs, how do they live? Do they live in groups? Do they live in small groups or larger groups?
I don't really know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure it varied a lot. And Joe or Maggie, do you know how many types of lemurs there are? There are like at least 15 different types, probably more. And so some live in groups. I know that a couple stays together, and together they nurture a baby. Anybody else? Yes, Ron?
Those trees at the end, is it baobab trees? Baobab. If you chop one of those down, is it solid wood or is there water in there?
There's water in there. They're filled with water.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's another tree called a bottle tree. But this one might as well be called a bottle tree because it holds things. Yeah. And I guess they do poke a hole in it and get water out of it if they need it. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, now I'm introducing. Get my other hat on here. Sorry. So Joe and Maggie Tieger moved to Tacoma from Maryland in 2014. They're both wildlife biologists. Joe retired from the Superfund program of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Maggie retired from the Endangered Species Program of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They love to travel, enjoy bird watching, and taking wildlife photographs while in new places. About 20 years ago, they decided to take at least one international trip a year and have visited many wonderful countries. Tonight, they share their adventure to South Georgia Island.
That's right.
And we're off.
The snow-covered mountains of South Georgia Island rise straight, almost straight out of the sea. The highest mountain reaches almost 10,000 feet. The wild, spectacular landscape supports large numbers of penguins, seals, and seabirds. It is one of the most remote islands of the world. Geographically, it's part of the Andes mountain range.
It's not advancing. Erik? Go again? There we go.
So if you look at this map, it's a little hard to read, the lettering small, but you can see South America, and this is Antarctica, and this is South Georgia Island. So if you go to the tip of South America, there's the Falkland Islands. So we departed from the Falkland Islands on our ship, and we came back to Argentina, to Ushuaia. If you'll notice, though, to get to South Georgia, you have to go through Drake's Passage and the Antarctic Convergence. And it's very, very rough water. And it takes about, depending on the weather, it can take about 2 days to get there. So this is South Georgia Island, and on this side of the island is where all the rough water is. So if you see this dotted line, that's where Shackleton made his trip, and Joe will talk about that later. But our journey was on the leeward side of the island, and all the places marked in red are places that we stopped. So the ship went to this side of the island, and then it would stop at each place, evaluate the weather, and then we would board Zodiacs and go to the island and land. So we went with the Sea Spirit Cheeseman's Ecology Safari, and the ship holds about 100 passengers. Our first landing was Salisbury Plain. It's the home of 60,000 pair of king penguins. And this is an adult, the ones with the white breasts. Those are adult penguins. They're about 3 feet tall. They're the world's second largest penguin, the largest being the emperor penguin in Antarctica. The brown fuzzy birds are juveniles. Once a year, penguins molt, and they look so shaggy. They are so funny to see. And there are feathers all over everywhere. You cannot walk anywhere without seeing feathers on the ground. The penguin has 4 layers of feathers, and there are about 70 feathers per square inch on its body. And I took a close-up picture because I thought the pattern of the feathers were so beautiful.
Basically, on the trip, there were two groups of passengers. There were, we call the trekkers, and the wildlife photographers. The trekkers were literally there to hike. So everywhere we went, people would board the Zodiacs, and the trekkers would go one way, and the wildlife photographers would go another. The penguins really didn't care. That little bird is one of the rarest birds in the world. It's called the South Georgia pipit, about the sparrow size. It was almost extinct. When the whalers were there, they brought reindeer to eat, and of course rats came with them like they go everywhere humans go. And between the rats, the reindeer ate all the foliage on the island, and the rats ate everything else. So in order to restore the island, the South Georgia Trust removed all the reindeer, and over 3 years, using a technique developed by the New Zealanders, sprinkled the island with rat poison for 3 successive years from helicopters. There are no more rats or reindeer on South Georgia. But there are 500,000 elephant seals. There are so many that later in the spring you cannot land a boat. The male elephant seal is a very large animal. Did I just skip one?
Yeah, you skipped one.
The males are a very large animal, and they really are, they're called the beach masters. Everything gets out of their way when it's time to move.
So you have to remember that penguin is 3 feet tall.
It's the 3rd largest seal in the world. Yeah, no, that's the largest seal. Another one. You see, these penguins are very happy to be coming out of the water because they have predators in the water and no predators on land. Now, Pryan Island, one of the other islands near South Georgia, is a specially protected area. It's one of the few places where there's a plateau. And if you are an albatross and you need a runway to get off, that's the only place you can nest and land. There are about 8,000 wandering albatross who nest only there, the only place in the world.
So our next stop was Fortuna Bay.
Oop.
And we were really very fortunate because it snowed. You would think, oh, you wouldn't want it to snow, but the landscape and the animals are so beautiful in the snow. So what happens is when we get land, we have a staging area, and each person has a large rubber container that they put their clothes and their extra clothing and photographic equipment. And so it's all put in one place so you know where to go back and retrieve stuff. But the penguins, they didn't seem to care. So I was busy taking pictures and noticed that I had water on my lens, so I had to clean it off, and here comes this penguin. He was so curious. They're not afraid of people, so it was really, really amazing to see them just come right up to you. And the penguins loved the snow. You could just see they were very happy when it started snowing.
Now, this is Stromness. Now, this part of the world was explored years, of course, a long time ago, and one of the great explorers was Shackleton. You really should read a book called Endurance. Because Mr. Shackleton went to the South Pole with his crew and his ship, got caught in the ice. The ship was crushed. They had to abandon the ship onto the ice pack and literally live on the ice pack for months. And then they got their lifeboats and sailed north, trying to get to here, to Grevurtgen, which is where there was a whaling station that they wanted to reach. So when he came to South Georgia, they founded this outpost in 1904, but when he was out on the ice pack and coming north, you remember that picture of the island before? He landed on the wrong side. His trip is considered one of the 2 greatest small boat navigation trips in the world. The other one, oddly enough, is Captain Bligh. But Mr. Shackleton did not lose a crew member in 17 months. Living, the conditions were just unbelievable. You ache just reading about them. This was their church.
So this is St. Andrews Bay at sunrise. We're there in the spring, so we have pretty long days. There are over 160 glaciers on South Georgia, and like the rest of the world, the glaciers are disappearing. So there were a lot of young male elephant seals, southern elephant seals, and this pair are practicing for when they future fight over, when they go to mating, they fight over the female. So southern elephant seals are called weaners by people, and what happens is when the mother has younger young, she weans the older pup, and they want to still wean, but she won't allow them to get close. And so they are very lonely. If you sit down on the beach, they come right up to you, they cuddle up to you, they're seeking comfort because they're not getting it from their mother. So there are 150,000 pair of king penguins in this area. It's hard to tell because they're all spread out. It's such a big area. There's a glacier. It's a glacier here. So these are juvenile king penguins, and this is called a crush, which is a group of rearing chicks in a large flock. And you'll notice there are only a few individual adult birds looking over these animals. Chicks are sometimes called oakum boys because they resemble the young sailors from the 19th century that repaired holes in the wooden sailing ships with a pitch and rope mixture called oakum.
Excuse me. So elephant seals in front, penguins in the back, and a little harder to see back in the brush there are fur seals setting up territory, Arctic fur seals. This is a brown skua. Now, brown skuas are scavengers. And so what the skuas do is they aggravate the elephant seal pups until they regurgitate some milk. And the moms always get mad at them, but they always fly away. Now, sometimes you have to go through a little work to see the birds. That's tussock grass, which is about waist high. So their drainage, the water runs down and creates channels between these bunches of grasses. So you're just climbing up this bluff to go see this bird. What's my place? Oh, light-mantled albatross. So South Georgia's only colony of chinstrap penguins is on Cooper Bay. And it was very restricted there. We took this picture from the Zodiac. We couldn't always land. Oh, oh. Dejowski Ford, the topography changed a lot to this part of the island. You notice there's really not much of a shoreline there for anything to land on. And the geology is very different. Maggie may have mentioned it, but South Georgia is an isolated part of the Andes Mountains. Get icebergs coming north from Antarctica. White Whale Bay, our last stop on South Georgia.
It's very cold today here, and you can see the ice clinging to this king penguin. In fact, its eye almost looks glassy because the ice is covering the eye. So Joe is taking a picture of the Antarctic fur seal in the front, while the king penguins are all marching in a line in the back. One last good look at king penguins. So the Antarctic fur seal, which has pale ears and almond-shaped eyes, are very cute, but they're very aggressive, and you have to be very careful to stay away from them. They have long white whiskers. So one last look at southern elephant seals. So the female has a really pink mouth. You'd think, oh, somebody's doctored that. They added all that red, but no, it really is red.
So we got in the zodiacs, you'll notice it almost looks like we're on land, but it's sea ice. It's just like a great big snow cone out there. And we're looking for leopard seals. Now, leopard seals are the third largest seal in the world, and you can think of them as the lions of this part of the world. And they came right up to the zodiac and looked at you. They know they're in charge, and there's absolutely no fear. You didn't want to put your hand in the water. Maggie took the picture out of them actually capturing penguins. She thought it was a little gory. So the king penguins are very, very cautious to go in the water. They know the elephants, these leopard seals are there.
Well, there is a leopard seal
And
there.
there is a leopard seal. And actually what's happened, he's just finished a kill, and the gulls and the skua are coming in to feed on the leftovers. And that's how we did it.
There's-
How long were you there?
The whole trip was probably about 2 weeks. You fly from here, at that time, you remember Argentina and the British had a little dust up about 20 years ago, where the Argentines wanted to take back what they call Las Maldives, and the British didn't want to give it to them. The British had a little war, and so when we were there, you could not go to the Falklands or South Georgia from Argentina. You had to go through Chile. So we went to Chile, then flew to the Falklands and boarded the ship. When we came back, we could land in Argentina. Now, I understand now you can go directly to Ushuaia and then go to Argentina.
You spend your money.
That might be it, just to get off. There really isn't much time on these trips. You land, you're kind of hustled off to the airport. Any other questions?
Well, the first seals actually attack people?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
They're setting their territories. Maggie got kind of up on a slope once and kind of get a little pushy and wave her coat a little bit to make them back off. They've got teeth like you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to.
What months were you there?
October, which is spring.
There's a very limited window to land on some of these on South Georgia. I mentioned the elephant seals come in. There's so many that line the beach. You literally cannot bring the Zodiac aboard. And then there's the weather. You can go down here and just not get. We were going back to the Falklands. The wind came up. One of our Zodiacs flipped. Fortunately, only the guides were on it. We got it back up, came back to the boat. Whenever you go to this part of the world, the weather rules. Nothing is predictable.
How cold was it?
Mostly not really cold. Around 30 was as low as it got. The day of the snow, you're dressed with muck boots, a couple of layers, rain pants, so the weather was fine.
Are the southern elephant seals larger than the northern ones then?
Yes,
Bigger.
yes, much bigger, Art.
What language is the, and look what harbors had, the harbors, the names of the different places?
Norwegian.
Norwegian,
Yeah, they were the dominant nation in terms of they took not only whales, they also took the seals. They really decimated the place. But it's a nice museum. It's an interesting place to go ashore. The George Island Trust has done a magnificent job of restoring the islands and protecting the islands.
Why do the emperor seals march in those giant lines?
Not
Oh,
only
you
can-
mean the king
the
penguin?
penguins?
Penguins.
Not only couldn't I tell why they marched in those lines, they'd be going in different directions at the same time. I could not figure out the motivation. They would, sometimes they would go readily into the water, and at other times they seemed to know that the leopard seals were there, and then it was a matter of, it's like flocks of birds. Can I get out there before the predator gets me? Because the leopard seals tend to stay inshore, so when the penguins can get in and get out far enough, then for a while they're safe. So guess you could say it's a really tough commute.
Are they inhabited? I mean, are they islands inhabited? Are there people who live there all the
Yeah.
time?
No, there is, just in the one place, the Whaling Village, which is now the South Georgia Trust. There's a museum there, a post office, but there are just a very few people that live there that manage the island.
And the,
Yeah.
and the research station.
Right, but everything else is wild.
Nobody there.
Is it still Norwegian? Is it still run by
No,
the
it's
Norwegian-
British.
By the British?
So who funds the North Georgia Trust?
Well, I think that it's mostly charitable donations, and I think if any government does it, it's the British government. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth. So if you want a spectacular trip, and I'm not doing a plug for anybody in particular, but if you want to travel very well and be very well looked after, Cheeseman's is a great company to travel with.
Thank you so much. A couple of things before I let you go. Some people are smoking in Madagascar, and I found this cigarette pack on the street. And the name of this type of cigarette is called Good Look. And you can't tell from out there in the audience, but there's a cross-section of a breast, a woman's breast, probably riddled with cancer. Why they put that on there, I don't know. And then another thing, just a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times, there was a whole story on Madagascar and about the food shortages there. And I've read this. If anybody wants it, they can have it. It's got some nice pictures. The last thing is I want to tell you that next month's show, I believe it's January 20, features writers. So Chris Britt, who lives here in Tacoma, he's a nationally syndicated political cartoonist. He's also published a couple of children's books now, and he's going to talk about his career, books, political cartoons. And he did a show for Tripod about 5 years ago when we were doing it in a different location. And look him up on the internet. I think you'll love what he does. And then Tom Llewellyn is a local guy also. He's the other half of Beautiful Angle, if you know what that is, Lance Kage's partner. And he has published 4 books for their novels for adolescents. So he'll talk about the pain of writing for a living. And then our third person will be Deborah Greenwood. And she makes art books. She makes her own paper. And she'll talk about her process and show you images of her book. January 20th. Put it on your calendar. Thanks a lot for coming out tonight.